Welcome back to another episode of the Media Pass. I'm your host, Alex, joined as always by your other host, Matt. Matt, long time no see. You have had a lot happen in your life since we last spoke. You graduated law school. You went to the draft combine. Tell us what it's been like for you since we last spoke, because the listeners haven't heard from us in quite a while. I've had people asking me, when's the next episode of the Media Pass coming out? And one, Matt's been a very busy man. Two, we had some technical difficulties with the last two episodes. But what's life been like in the life of Matt?
Yeah, we've been actively recording podcast episodes. It's just not working in our favor right now. And then Alex is such a perfectionist that, like, if he senses just a dip in our quality, he doesn't want you guys having to deal with that. And that's why we love him and we appreciate him. Yeah. So now I am technically a member of the Michigan Bar Association. I can't actually practice the law until I pass the bar exam, which I'm going to take in February. But the good news is, for fans of the show and fans of my work, I'm not actually going to be a practicing attorney. We could talk another day about why I went to law school. Some of it's my inability to let go of my college career, which now I've had to. But so I'll still be doing the same thing. Don't worry about it. You remember that scene from Wolf of Wall Street? I'm not fucking leaving. So there's that. Combine was super cool, especially like last year I was there on an internship basis. I was interning for an agency. This summer, I was able to do it on behalf of one of the outlets I write for. So that's like, you get the media availability, you get to sit inside at the scrimmages and all that stuff. It was cool. I got to sit next to Rich Paul. I didn't say a word to him, but I sat next to Rich Paul during Bronny's scrimmage. Sam Presti was like 4 seats over to my right. It was funny. He was 4 seats over to my right. And then the following night, he's in Dallas OKC for game 5, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. It was a lot of fun. Do you want me to should I just share some of the stuff that was I was hearing about certain guys, or do you
sure? If you whatever you can divulge, why not?
Yeah, well, first of all, most of this is just if you're just there, you hear a lot of shit, right? You're just kind of sitting around at the coffee shop and you don't have your headphones in. People just say things. For example, here's a great one. I was sitting yesterday. This is nothing to do with the draft guys, but sitting yesterday, and some guy who works for one of those coaching services that they use, right? So one of the assistant coaches for the Indiana Pacers came and sat next to him. I couldn't identify who it was. I don't think it was like a former player or anything, right? Comes and sits next to him. It was right after game 5 against the Knicks, and they were talking about it, and the Pacers assistant just looks at him. He goes they're tough, man. He just does those guys, they don't give up without a fight, man. And he just does and it's just so, it was so perfect, the way he said it. I'm yeah, of course they don't give up. It's the New York Knicks. It's Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart. And Dante DiVincenzo, of course they don't give up without a fight. So it's just you hear shit like that. The big stuff I've heard is the one big NBA thing. Well, 2 big NBA things I heard were Chauncey Billups is likely on his way out the door in Portland. And I guess I get, from what I understand, Kevin Durant wanted Chauncey to be the coach of the Phoenix Suns. So he was hoping that he would leave Portland and go to Phoenix, but then they hire Budenholzer. It's kind of remember years ago when LeBron James wanted Jason Kidd to be the head coach of the Lakers, and then they ended up hiring Frank Vogel and made Jason Kidd his assistant. But so it's kind of that situation. I've heard that. I heard that the 76ers are trying to sell their first round pick. So I assume they're trying to create cap space, right? Players that I've heard whose stock are rising big time: Devin Carter, Jalen Tyson. I hear good things about him. Isaiah Crawford is a name who's probably going to go undrafted or late second round. I think what I'm understanding, he could be the G.G. Jackson of this draft class is what I'm getting. And then I think the big one everyone wants to know about with Bronny, I heard a lot of scouts there give him a first round grade, and a lot of real scouts, not former scouts. Players. Or, yeah. It was the guys who know what they're talking about. We're giving him a first round grade, which maybe just says something about the draft class. Again, I haven't watched really much of these guys. Zach Edey looked good, though. He performed well. People liked him. He had a good showing. I've watched him quite a bit. Stephon Castle. I was sitting in media available. This is the last one I'll divulge before we actually get to the nitty gritty. Stephon Castle said in the media availability I was sitting on that he doesn't want to play next to another like point guard. And so that might, if he says that to teams during their interviews, that might affect his draft stock one way or the other.
Which, I feel like it kind of makes sense. If I'm a player like that, I wouldn't want to be drafted to play, second fiddle or not, be a backup. He seems to me like he kind of strikes me as like a starting caliber guard. So like, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, so the way it came up is some Grizzlies reporter asked him if he would be cool playing next to John Morant, and he kind of made it sound like he wouldn't be. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad I have you here because I know absolutely nothing about this year's draft because everything I've heard is that it's basically a crapshoot. The draft is a crapshoot anyways, but sometimes it's an easier crapshoot to guess on than others. But this year it seems like it's just entirely a crapshoot. By that, I'm not saying that there's not good players in this draft. I'm saying that like it's so all over the place that it's kind of hard to get a good read on things. I'm sure there will be all-stars that come out of this draft like there always are. There was one other thing. Oh, well, I can't remember what it was. Anyways, let's get into the task at hand, what the real pressing issues that we have going on in the world right now, the NBA playoffs. What's on your mind right now with the playoffs? What's like I say the NBA playoffs, what's the first thing that pops into your mind pertaining to this year?
Uncertainty. I never know what the hell is going on. Like I always think I do. Like I guess we can start with Can we start with the Thunder Mavs?
Yes, unfortunately we can.
Because I watched all the game ones, right? And with Denver, Minnesota, it's like, okay, this is going to be a battle, right? With New York, Indiana, I'm like, this is going to be – I still like my Knicks, but I think this is going to be a battle. With Cleveland, Boston, I was like, I think it's going to be closer than it looks in game one. Honestly, it was a pretty competitive series despite Cleveland losing everyone. And I think that series would be much more interesting if they were healthy. But with the Mavericks and OKC, I watched the first game and I'm like, okay, the Thunder just have way more two-way guys. They have just more guys that can play on both ends of the court at a playoff level. I'm like, Dallas, it's finally caught up to them. All these, how I was talking about the Dunk Dunk guys. They made this comment after the PJ Washington trade that Dallas has their two all-star, all-NBA guys, and then they have a bunch of eighth guys, right? It's just a bunch of imperfect role players. Well, so that led me to believe, I'm like, okay, this Thunder one, I feel certain. I feel certain about this. It's going to be 5 games. That's it. The Thunder have got them. They're just a better team. And now here we are. Dallas is 1 game away. And if it wasn't for some game 4 heroics from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and his mid-range shooting, Dallas would be waiting for the winner of Minnesota-Denver to play them in the Western Conference Finals. And I don't know. It just made me question a lot about what I know about basketball. Because when we made our tiers list, this was after the PJ Washington Gafford trade. I was like, yeah, the Mavericks they're a team. They're good, but they're not even in my outer circle of title contenders, right? They're they didn't have any statistical indicators that would lead me to believe it. And now here we are, and they are 1 game away from being in the conference finals. And when you're in the conference finals, that means you have a shot at winning the NBA championship.
Yeah. You guys know I'm a Thunder fan. This is tough for me to talk about. Not actually. I mean, it's not actually making me lose any. I've actually slept very well over the past week. But
congrats, man.
That being said, thank you. I think OKC had a game plan, and that game plan just kind of went out the window when Derrick Jones Jr. started making his corner threes. PJ Washington becomes probably the best spot up 3-point shooter of the playoffs right now. Like, I don't think
he's this year's Rui Hachimura.
Yeah. I think, OKC had a game plan. Maybe it was a good game plan. I'm not saying it was wrong for them to think like, okay, yeah, we'll leave Derrick Jones Jr. open and make him hit his threes. He started hitting his threes. Josh Green, we're going to make him lean heavily on his 3-point shot. Well, it's been going in. So, I understand the approach. The thing that's kind of frustrated me is a lot of OKC's problems have been predicated on we're helping off of these guys and expecting these guys to make their shots or not make their shots, and those shots are going in. Well, to me, I see that happening, and this is easy for me to say from, the perspective of somebody sitting watching at home. But to me, I see these shots going in. And like one game of hot 3-point shooting, I kind of look at and I'm like, okay, well, you don't change your entire game plan based on that. But like 5 games now of, these guys are making their threes. At that point, I'm kind of like, maybe you think about not helping off these guys in the corners as much. Maybe you think about playing a bit more straight up and not going too crazy helping off of guys and forcing Luka and Kyrie to have to do everything. And I'm not saying that the Mavericks wouldn't still be winning this series if they were leaning more heavily just on the heroics of Luka and Kyrie to get them wins. But I do think the whole we're going to help off Derrick Jones Jr., we're going to help off of PJ Washington, we're going to help off of Josh Green. To me, that kind of went out the window like 3 games ago.
You think? So I watched Game 5. And honestly, to me, that the whole was like the main takeaway I had is like Dallas just shot better than OKC. Like, because they're both doing the same thing to each other, like both strategically leaving certain guys open. And then it's like Derrick Jones Jr. wants to hit every 3. PJ Washington wasn't as hot as he's been in past games, but he still hit some big shots. He still mean mugged some people, but like then Dort not hitting his threes, and Isaiah Joe wasn't hitting his threes, and Chet Holmgren wasn't hitting his threes, like, so it's just like, I wonder how different we look at game. I don't like come away from Game 5 and be like, yeah, Dallas has figured out OKC. Like, I think OKC is still very much alive in this series. But the one thing that's interesting to me, he didn't start out playing in this series, but Tim Hardaway Jr., he's actually a legitimate shooter, right? He's one of their legit shooters. The problem with him is his defense. It's always been the defense, right? But like, something that's bothering me about OKC is they're not punishing him for being on the floor. Like they haven't had to pay the tab. So it's giving Dallas enhanced spacing, right? Without having to pay any cost. The same thing with Jaden Hardy. Jaden Hardy got hunted. Like, honestly, Jaden Hardy held up kind of well a couple times. Shea tried to hunt him, but that's not the way they should be trying to hunt him. The way they should be trying to hunt him. There was a clip actually with, I posted on Twitter, Jalen Williams in the fourth quarter. He was kind of cooking in the beginning of the fourth, but he had Tim Hardaway Jr. on him, right? And you'd think, oh, he's got to hunt him now. No. What he did is had Chet, who was being guarded by PJ Washington, who is a phenomenal secondary rim protector, right? He had PJ come up on and got PJ switched on him, right? So that removes PJ from the paint and puts Tim Hardaway Jr. at 6'4", 6'5", whatever he measures it at, in the paint, right? And then Jalen drove. He knew he could get by PJ. And then it's Tim Hardaway Jr. trying to play low man, which doesn't work when it's Jalen freaking Williams coming at the rim. So I think like they need to be more creative about exploiting when Tim Hardaway Jr. is on the court, like making that something that they can't go to. I think Chet also needs to be more like physical with them. Like when they're putting smaller defenders on him, he's got to make them pay for it more. And I just don't know, like with what you're suggesting, what you're prescribing now, like to kind of give up on, because like Derrick Jones Jr. has been a bad shooter his entire career. PJ Washington's been a below average shooter his entire career. Like I know they're hot right now, but like when does it stop? And like, do you really want to concede one-on-ones to Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic? Like, do you really not want to bring 2 to the ball against those guys? Well,
to me, it's kind of the same philosophy of like, they're going to hurt you no matter what. So like, we do the same. We talk about the same thing with Jokic. Like teams double Jokic all the time, but it doesn't matter. And I think kind of you can say the same thing with Luka. Like, yeah, you can throw another body at him and you can try and time it right and bring it from the right spot on the floor to where you minimize his like options. But at the end of the day, it's Luka Doncic. He's going to be able to make the right play. And especially with how shaky Luka's been at times during this series, to me, he's done more damage with his passing than he has his scoring for the majority of this series. So like, I don't necessarily think, I think you've seen more from the other guys that you're helping off of where they are making you pay than you've seen from Luka, like in just individual one-on-ones. That makes me think like, okay, let's adjust a little bit and maybe not help off as often or be a bit more picky about who we're helping off of and, you know, where on the floor we're giving things up. I don't know. It's just, I'm not saying the philosophy of helping off of Derrick Jones Jr. is wrong. I'm not saying that like historically he's, you know, shown that he can hit his shots. I understand that like that's the guy you're going to try and help off of. But also I think the issue now is becoming, you see OKC help off of other guys on the floor so much, and like how many easy lobs are the other guys getting? Like it's not just the 3-point shot. It's like you're now conceding a lot of cuts. Like I forget who tweeted this, but somebody tweeted, it's ironic that one of the best cutting teams in the NBA is getting back cut to death. And like, that's what Dallas has been doing. They've just been abusing like the lax defense. And a lot of it is effort, honestly. And I hate saying that, but like, I think OKC's defensive effort outside of a select few guys has been pitiful. It's like a lack of engagement. It's a lack of effort, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and like speculate as to why, but like you can see when guys aren't putting in the effort that you're accustomed to. And unfortunately that's blended over to the offensive end as well. Just a lot of carelessness. OKC's offense seems so slow right now, and really like removing the defense from the equation. Cause I think ultimately, yeah, there's only so much you can do defensively when guys are hitting their shots, and like you have to try and take something away. So like, I understand that, but let's ignore the defense for a second and talk about the offense. I think OKC's offensive execution has been really bad this series. I think we are seeing the limitations of OKC's offense and kind of how far, like, yeah, they pretty much do just run everything through Shea, and they pretty much do just run everything through Jalen Williams. And like, yeah, they'll have the pick and pop with Chet. And, you know, if Chet's hitting his threes, great. And then maybe he can start attacking closeouts if Dallas starts being aggressive on those closeouts. But I think the big problem for OKC is that the threes aren't going in right now. They've shot pretty poorly. Isaiah Joe has been like, I don't know what happened to him. He's not making his threes. I think I doing the whole, you go ahead. Maybe we might be thinking the same thing.
Is it like my thinking with Isaiah Joe is like, he's just getting hunted so much on defense that his legs are getting tired, and he doesn't have as much under his shot, like as much of his legs under his shot anymore. Because I mean, that's what the Dallas Mavericks are doing every possession, was like, let's get Isaiah Joe in the action. And that's why Dagnall eventually just, you know, flipped the switch and said, okay, we're going Case and Wallace the rest of the way.
Yeah, I definitely think there's some truth to it. And then even outside of just Isaiah Joe, like up and down the roster, this was one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the NBA during the regular season. The only thing I can really, you know, think that the problem is like they're a young team that has like a little bit of the yips. Like this is a high pressure situation. They're going against a very experienced team. And you know, to shoot 25% in game 5 is just to be one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the NBA. It's like, yeah, you can have an off shooting night, but it wasn't just like one guy didn't hit his threes. Lou Dort, 25%, Jalen Williams, 0 of 3, Chet, 1 of 5, Isaiah Joe, 2 of 8, Cason Wallace, 1 of 5. It's like, yeah, that's abnormally bad up and down the roster. Like all these guys it was not like this one guy or these two guys were missing their threes. It's like, no, everyone is not making their threes. Which, I mean, OKC is a team that it's all drive and kick. And I think when you're not making your threes, your driving and kicking doesn't really work as well because the other team isn't really going to be super aggressive closing out, which is where the driving really shines, is when you're getting teams to aggressively close out on you. And if OKC's just not making them pay, then what's the offense at that point?
Yeah, and I think you're getting at a good point here, where it's like, I think what's the problem with OKC is more their offense than their defense in this series. Like, yeah, I know Dallas, getting some good stuff from their role players. But overall, like if you look at these games, it's not like Dallas is putting up 120. They're barely hitting the century mark with points in most of these games. And that gets me to something interesting. I think we've maybe waited a little too long to say this, but Dallas's defense deserves a hat tip. Since game one, they've come in with the idea we're going to switch a lot. And that's how you cut the teeth off of ball movement. OKC has some of the best ball movement. I don't know if this was one of the deleted pods or this is actually one that went public, but one thing me and you both were kind of worried about with this Dallas defense is how they were going to handle a team that, knows how to move the ball side to side way more than the Clippers. And how they're going to deal with it is just by switching everything and making it so that, your ball movement gets defanged. Like if you look yesterday, I think OKC lost the assist battle by 15 or something, right? And that's a byproduct of OKC having to constantly bring two to the ball against Dallas, while Dallas is like, okay, let's just switch everything. And they do that, I think. And the hat tip to Derek Lively. If you look at the difference when Derek Lively's on the court compared to Gafford, I think I had it up just a second ago. But Derek Lively has a net rating for this series of a plus 18.8 when he's on the floor. That's insane. And when Daniel Gafford's on the floor, it's a minus 12.5, I believe. And I think why that is because Lively's better at moving his feet on the perimeter. He's better at switching on like a Shea or a J-Dub or whoever it is that they have him switch on, as Gafford's kind of more interior focused. He's not as good at moving his feet laterally. But so there's that. I think also Dallas is doing a good job, like OKC, of leaving the right guys open. It's a lot of Dort threes. I know Isaiah Joe took a lot in game 5, but before that he wasn't getting a high volume of them off. There's that. And then I also just like their attention to detail is phenomenal, man. Like whenever like Gafford's like the high tag position, right? And there's like a smaller guy at the low man, like Gafford immediately will call him to scram switch. Like they just know it's like they're triple switching, they're pre-switching, like they're so in sync as a team. And then I think what was emblematic of it all yesterday, you talk about effort with OKC compared to Dallas, when Derrick Jones Jr. comes out of nowhere to block Chet's three to close out the game. Like they are just so dialed in. They like everyone except for Luka, pretty much every possession he has a breakdown. And that's what makes this Dallas thing so much better, because I feel like every defensive possession, Luka has a breakdown, and the rest of this defense just finds a way to clean it up for him. So, I mean, they deserve the utmost praise alongside like the like what you're kind of getting at, where it's like, you know, OKC does have still a little ways to go on offense. But then again, I get that, like I say that, but also like OKC could get hot like Denver did in games 3 and 4 against Minnesota and win this series. And then like, we'd be like, okay, well, they're in the conference finals, you know, like, so that could also happen. And we won't even be talking about this. That's what's so weird about these playoffs. That's why it drives me crazy. Yeah.
I think the thing that frustrates me the most is like, I think OKC, a big part of it too, is OKC's having to work so hard because of like you said, Dallas has been playing great defense. OKC's having to work so hard for their points. Like you'll see Shea, whenever he goes on his little runs, it's like, it's tough mid-range shot after mid-range shot. It's like, you know, 2 defenders on him, 3 defenders. He's finishing over 3 defenders, getting to the line. And like the other shooters on the team, I'm not saying that like it's a bad thing that Shai's having to do this or that Shai's doing this. It's like, yeah, no one else is doing anything. So Shai's got to kind of take it upon himself. I understand that. But like these guys are not, OKC has never gotten to a point in the series where I'm like, they're in rhythm. Like their offense is moving the way that it's supposed to. They're consistently capable of creating good looks. At every turn, it's really felt like, yeah, OKC might go on a 10-3 run or a 15-4 run, but they had to bust their butt to get those 15 points. Like every possession was like a absolute slugfest. And I don't know what the answer is, because like you said, they could get hot. They've generated good looks on occasion. It's not like every single shot they're taking is a contested shot, but I think part of that is a testament to how disruptive Dallas has been in throwing OKC out of rhythm and preventing them from like, okay, shooters see a few go in. Also, credit to Jason Kidd. He's been pissing me off with how good he is calling timeouts, because every time it feels like OKC might start getting hot, he calls a timeout. And he's like just very proactive with it. I think Jason Kidd has coached his butt off this series, top to bottom. Might be outside. I mean, we could talk about Timberwolves Denver, but Jason Kidd's been top 3 coaches of the postseason so far, easily to me. I mean, he's been fantastic, which is funny because I know a lot of Dallas fans did not like Jason Kidd during the regular season.
He got better, dude, after he started wearing those glasses. I'm telling you, that's what made him a better coach. One other thing I just want to mention is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander did not hit a single shot at the rim, according to Dunks and Threes, throughout game 3 and 4. Is that not just bonkers?
Man, Dallas has made them like look like an entirely different team. It's pretty incredible. Which is why, I mean, I'll be honest, I think Dallas is probably going to make the conference finals. I would be, at this point, I've seen enough from OKC to where like the things that OKC would have to do to win this series compared to the things that Dallas has to do to win this series, I think the things that OKC has to do are probably just a little bit of a bridge too far. Even if they start hitting their threes, unless it's like scorching hot, I would imagine Dallas is probably going to end up winning the series, but you know, anything's possible. But that leads us to the other side of the Western Conference with Denver and Minnesota. Where are you at with this series?
I thought I was done with it yesterday. Coming into yesterday, I was like, because Denver starts on this 9-2 run. I'm like, okay, they're dialed in. They know what they're going to do. Like, first of all, man, geez, things have changed. Last time me and Alex talked about this series was after game 2. And I mean, I think we were all, as a basketball whole, kind of just shocked, perplexed, amazed by what had happened. And since then, Denver wins 3 games. They pull off 3 in a row. And game 5, Jokic just looked like the best player on the planet Earth, like on 3 different planet Earths, on 19 different timelines. There's no version of the timeline where there was anybody better at basketball than Nikola Jokic in game 5. So I'm just like, okay, they got it, But then, Minnesota comes back. I think some of it was just like it felt very Knicks game 5 to me, in the sense that like it just seemed like Minnesota wanted it more. You could tell they had 11 offensive rebounds in the first half. Had winning the turnover battle. They were getting every 50-50 ball in that first half when they were kind of mounting their crazy league. That stood out to me. I think Denver just missed a lot of shots. Like the underrated part about Denver games 3 through 5 is they were just hitting a ridiculous amount of threes. They were like over 40% each one of those games. And it was like Justin Holiday was hitting threes and Christian Braun was hitting some threes. And we're like, okay, maybe this will slow down. Maybe that'll change the math a little bit. That definitely slowed down for Denver. Minnesota didn't have a crazy 3-point shooting game, but they still outshot them by like 15%. I think Mike Conley obviously always helps. Having him as opposed to not having him is important. I think Denver's defensive execution I didn't like too much. Like in Game 5, what Denver was doing that I really liked is they just started sending doubles, and even if he wasn't calling for a ball screen. And Anthony Edwards still, for all he's great at, still is not really good about doing more than just making the one pass away out of the double. And when you do the one pass away, Denver's so good at rotating that there's no advantage there. You have to hit. Like, did you see that clip yesterday where Cat hits the cross court skip pass when he gets doubled? And then whoever was in the corner catches it. Jokic rotates towards him, and the corner guy passes it to Gobert for the dunk. Do you remember what I'm talking about, or is that way too specific?
I think so, yeah. No,
yeah.
I think I remember
like,
what you're
Ant doesn't
about.
ever make that pass. Like, hardly ever will make that pass. Right?
Yeah.
And so, for some reason, Denver stopped doing that as often in Game 6. They also were just conceding mismatches to Karl Anthony Towns like it was nobody's business. And it was fine at first because they were doubling and Cat was just doing the one pass away thing himself. But then Cat adapted because he is a pretty good passer for his size. And he was starting to burn him for it and take advantage of those advantages. The other thing that was interesting to me, I really liked from Chris Finch is, so Game 1, like, okay, the big rub on Anthony Edwards as a defender is like when he's on ball, he's dialed in, he can pull his shorts up, like nobody's getting by him, right? And that's why everyone like is so enamored with his defense. They call him all NBA defender or whatever, because it's like something you can see. Most people watch the ball when they watch basketball, right? But like the guys who know the story, like he suffers from some off ball warts, right? And in Game 4, I believe Jaden McDaniels was the one guarding Murray or Nickeil Alexander. Those were like the two primary guys. And Anthony was back off ball. He was guarding like MPJ. And I think he had a lot of lapses off ball, both in terms of on defense, he was lapsing off ball and he was getting back cut or something like that. And then on offense, he would also like when he wasn't the guy shooting it, he would like just sit there and watch the ball instead of like run back on defense and transition. What Chris Finch and Micah Nori did in Game 6 is put him back on Murray, which forces him again to be dialed in on defense. And then just overall, they did a better job of getting back in transition. It reminded me a lot of Golden State last year in Game 6 against the Kings when they were just like pristine transition defense, super dialed in. So that's kind of like the main takeaways. What does that mean for Game 7? I'm not sure. Like I tweeted something out before I turn this over to you. I tweeted something out last night early in the game, and I said, I think our main takeaway from this series will be when an elite offense meets an elite defense, almost always the elite offense should have the edge because no matter how great of a defense you are, if you're going against an offense of equal caliber, you can't take away everything. There'll always be one more counter, you know? And so in a 7-game series, that last counter will probably be found at the end of the series. And so that's why I'm still leaning Denver. I still think that they can look at this film and be like, okay, there's stuff we can figure out. But I mean, it's Game 7, man. It's anybody's world now.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's going to be a toss-up just because of the nature of like, you know, one team is going to hit their shots probably and the other team isn't. And that will probably end up being the story because in this era of basketball, that's usually how it goes. But I mean, there's a chance because the alternative is it's a complete shootout, which I don't know. This postseason, we haven't really seen a ton of games that are just like, this is just a shootout. Like both teams, 120, 130 points. It's like, no, it's usually been one team has 105 points. The other team has 97. You know, that's been the story. And then whichever team shot better is the team that ends up winning, obviously. But usually there's been pretty wide discrepancies. It feels like one team will shoot, you know, I think we said it about the Timberwolves last night. They shot 37.5% from three, which isn't spectacular, but Denver shot 19% from three. So it's like, that's a wide range of shooting. And well, another thing that Minnesota did that I liked that they went back to more, a lot of people said that they weren't doing it. They like completely went away from it, but which isn't necessarily true. It still happened in the previous games that Denver won, but it seemed like it didn't happen as often. But defending Jokic straight up, and listen, I'm not saying that Karl Anthony Towns is like the Jokic stopper. I'm not saying that at all. But you look at the differences between Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert. What's the difference there? Cat's shorter. He has a lower center of gravity. He's a little bit stockier, a little bit more mass. And I think he absorbs Jokic's contact a little bit better than Gobert does. I think Jokic has a little bit of a harder time bumping him off his spots. And when you put Cat on Jokic, you get the benefits of Rudy Gobert as like a help defender. What was that clip that it was a stupid clip, but I saw a clip where they were saying like, oh, Rudy Gobert, like you can't get 3 weak side help blocks. Like, come on, man. Like, what are you doing? You're not getting I could average 10 weak side help blocks if I was, Rudy Gobert. I'm like, first of all, that's not how like defense works. Like you can't just decide, oh, I'm going to like operate 100% as like a weak side help defender. Like if your team says you're going to defend this guy, then you're going to defend that guy. And you may not end up being in like, it's all very circumstantial. Like anyone who's watched basketball, like deeper than just like sitting at a Buffalo Wild Wings with their brain turned off, like understands that defense is more than just this guy needs to be matching up against this guy one-on-one. Like, oh, you're the best defender in the world, so you need to be defending the best scorer in the world. It's like, no, that's not how it works.
Hurt me about that.
What were you going to say?
What hurt me about that dialogue was in Game 5, a guy who Jamal Crawford has done a good job on the broadcast, right? He has some nice insights. But he makes a comment and he goes, "You can't be defensive player of the year and not like." He was getting mad because Gobert was telling, I think it was Kyle Anderson or Naz Reid to make sure they pick up Jokic, right? And that's because that's what the scheme calls for. That's how you play the man spy defense, right? And Crawford's like, if you're the defensive player of the year, you can't be asking other dudes to pick up the best player on the planet. You got to go do that yourself. I'm like, you are in the league, man. How does this not like? It's fine, whatever. If somebody on Twitter, who the extent of their basketball experience was, I don't know, rec league, right? 3rd grade rec, then fine. They want to say it. They want to simplify it to Gobert needs to guard Jokic or he's not a good defender. Fine, do it. But you were in the league, man. You played on a goddamn NBA team. You guys used defensive tactics. It wasn't that long ago. It wasn't the 60s when everyone just played ISO defense and there was no zone to be allowed. You had tactics, like advanced tactics. Like I could pull up a Clippers game that he was a part of where they used like pre-switching and played the matchups and stuff to create more rim protection. That's just not, I don't know. Sorry, continue on your rant. I just needed to say that. I still love Jamal Crawford, but come on, man. You're better than that. Yeah,
it's annoying. I mean, and it's a disservice to Rudy Gobert, which, there have been times. I think there are fair criticisms to be made of Rudy Gobert's defense in this series. His defense on Jokic, I don't think is one of them. Specifically that game where Jokic went nuclear. Excuse me. I think it's a disservice to Rudy Gobert, but I think more so it's a disservice to Nikola Jokic, where like, why can we just not accept as a society that you cannot defend Nikola Jokic? Like we always talk about like 99th percentile skills. We talk about Jokic's 99th percentile touch. I think at this point it's like 100th percentile touch. I don't think I've ever seen a guy with the touch that he has. Like it's truly unstoppable. And like we talk about elite defense and like being able to shut a guy down. But you said it a second ago, the best offense is still going to beat the best defense. We see all the time a guy will play incredible defense on Jamal Murray for 23 seconds of the shot clock, but then Jamal Murray just turns around and hits the most like BS shot you've ever seen in your entire life. It's like when Nikola Jokic dials that in and gets that touch firing on all cylinders, you can't defend a guy who's spinning away from you with a hook shot from 10 feet from the basket, and he's like literally spinning it off the backboard to make the shot. Like, you just can't do anything about it. And I think it's disrespectful to Jokic to be like, why didn't Rudy Gobert just defend him better? It's like, what did you want him to do? Like, can anyone sit down and like break down the film and look me dead in the eye and say, well, Rudy Gobert should have done this differently? I'm sure there are things in this series where you can point to Rudy Gobert and say, oh, he should have done this differently. But like when Jokic was doing what he was doing in Game 5, it's like, I don't really know what you guys like. What did you guys think was going to happen? Like, it's Jokic. He's just that good. And like, it's okay to just accept that. Anyways, let's move on from like the narrative of it all and get back to the actual topic at hand.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
About the topic at hand, right? So you mentioned this is going to come down to probably what'll most likely happen is it'll come down to shot making in Game 7. Who's going to hit their shots? Who's going to execute? I think regardless of what happens on Sunday, Minnesota has done enough to show that they are like, they're Denver's equal. Like they can, you know what I mean? If they played each other 100 times, it'd be closer to 50-50 than we think. Like, I think that's like the main, like, because you need luck. You need luck to win an NBA title, right? You need some luck. You need to have favorable matchups. You need to be healthy, all this stuff, right? So like what I'm doing in my head is like, when I talk about teams in the past, like those 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns, right? I think like Nash proved during that time that he could quarterback a championship caliber team, right? Even though they never even went to the NBA Finals, okay? And I think Minnesota has proven in this series that they are a championship caliber team, regardless of what happens on Sunday.
I agree 100%. Here's a fun mental exercise.
Please.
Does Boston beat, and I say Boston, I think the Knicks have a chance if they end up being the team that goes to the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm not saying the Knicks do not have a chance.
Don't count them out.
I'm not saying the Pacers don't have a chance of going to the Eastern Conference Finals either. Anything can happen. We have no idea. We'll find out tonight. But let's just ignore that and just talk about Boston, because Boston's been like the de facto favorites in the East all year. They were the 1 seed. Let's talk about Boston. Does Boston beat Denver or Minnesota? Which team do you think Boston has? No, let's not say who they have a better chance against. Do you realistically see Boston beating either of those teams in a finals matchup?
The one thing in Denver now that's worrying me is I think Minnesota has kind of pulled back the curtains a little bit on some of their weaknesses with their bench. So that's really worrisome. Like if they're going to need to really ride their main five hard, and Christian Braun, who's been impressive in this series, but like I just see too much Justin Holiday for my liking. Reggie Jackson's just not been good. Peyton Watson getting played off the floor like kills me, because like they have this nice wholesome commercial of him and Jokic like hanging out by the pool, and then Peyton Watson's not even allowed to play in the games. I had a lot of hopes for him. So so that's worrisome. I wonder how much mileage the Celtics can get off the non-Jokic minutes and how much they'll be able to exploit that. So I don't know. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say with that. I know like when Jokic is on the floor, he's got him. Like he's surgical with him. Like there's no, like, Horford's too old. Kristaps is too frail. Tatum's not going to deal with him. Like he's got him. He's got the Celtics on his own. And then with Minnesota, this mental exercise is hard. It's really hard. I mean, they still have, the thing is they've shown us they still have the problems we thought they did with the half court offense.
Yeah.
But like the gear that they could turn on with that defense and how the thing is the Celtics are not the Denver Nuggets on offense. The Celtics, whenever they see an elite defense, they start to fumble over themselves. And I don't, and especially with how much size Minnesota has and how switchable they are, I don't think Boston can get as much mileage off of Kristaps' mismatch post-ups as they could against other teams. Oh, man, now that I'm thinking about it, man, I don't know, dude. Would I pick Minnesota to beat Boston in a 7-game series? Would you do it?
You were saying that, and I was like, you're kind of talking me into it, and I think you're talking yourself into it.
Yeah, would you do it? I don't know. I keep thinking about that early season matchup when they were both healthy.
Went to like double overtime.
Yeah, and Minnesota came out on top. And yeah, I don't know, man. I don't. I think Boston's offense would be in a rut if they played Minnesota. Like, I don't think they would have what the Denver was able to do, like kind of break through from it and Jokic have this crazy game and this 130 offensive rating when he's on the floor in games 3 through 5. I don't think that would be possible for Boston, to be honest. I just think Minnesota would give them so many fits. But my concern is I think Boston's got great defensive personnel, especially for guarding Ant with Drew Holiday and Derek White. So that's also interesting. Yeah. And then there's also
I think Boston would have to lean on their defense way more in that series.
Yeah. There's also if Kristaps is not healthy, I don't think Boston's beating either of these teams. You know?
I think that's fair. The other thing is, like, I think the kind of like counter to Minnesota's defense that like Denver's had, like, well, not necessarily the counter, but like the thing that Denver has playing to their advantage is like Jokic is somebody that like he will almost always draw extra attention. Like, even if you say on a possession you're going to play him straight up, like chances are someone is going to sag off somebody a little bit too far, and like he's going to find a way to punish you. Like, he's just so good at manipulating defenses that sometimes it doesn't matter what your approach is. It's like he's going to figure something out. Whereas like you look at Boston and the very like unselfish approach that they have. Like Boston, yes, Jason Tatum, I think he's been more aggressive at times throughout the playoffs. He's kind of picking and choosing which games he's going to turn it up, but unselfish offense is kind of like that plays to Minnesota's strengths because they have a lot of good individual defenders, and then like they've got Gobert like holding things down, and their scheme is so like airtight against these more kind of ball movement focused offenses where they're just looking to like get you in rotation, where like you can't really get away with that a ton against Minnesota because like they have such good guys that can close out on you quick, that don't give up a ton of advantages, and they've got Rudy Gobert waiting down there for you. So I just would be interested to see in a potential Celtics Timberwolves matchup, like, would the Celtics be able to capitalize on a consistent enough of a basis to like break down Minnesota's defense? Because the Celtics seem, I think we've seen throughout the entire playoffs so far, they're like very committed to their approach. Like they don't waver from it. There's not really a point where Boston is usually like, okay, what we normally do isn't working, so we're going to try something different. It's like, no, they have their approach. They're going to live and die by the math. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Move on to the next game. But I would be interested to see against Minnesota. I think that's one of the reasons Minnesota gives them so many problems is Minnesota is able to shift the math a little bit in their favor and kind of shake Boston out of their shoes a little bit.
So also I'm interested to see the 5-out and how Gobert handles some 5-out, right, like actual functional 5-out, not what Phoenix was doing. But so are you saying then that you think the winner of Sunday's game is going to win the Western Conference Finals as well? Is that what you're saying?
At this point, I've seen enough from Dallas to be like, Dallas has a shot. I think the Timberwolves Nuggets matchup has been more of like the highs for both of those teams are like mind-blowingly good. Whereas like the highs for Dallas have been like, this is a really, really good team. Don't get me wrong. I think Dallas absolutely has a shot to make it out of the West. I am not counting them out by any means. Do not interpret it that way, whoever's listening right now. But I think the best versions of the Timberwolves and the Nuggets are better than the best version of Dallas. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this: like, if I'm Dallas, say Dallas does win, right? They win. They play tomorrow, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. They play tomorrow. They win, right? If I'm Dallas, I'm sitting, at somebody's house. Maybe they're all at Jason Kidd's house. They had him over for lunch or something, and they're watching this Denver Minnesota game. I'm probably rooting for Minnesota just because, like, not to say that Minnesota's easy. I just think like Dallas. I mean, Denver would be a death sentence without Maxi Kleber. Just because, I don't know, Gafford and Lively are not those kind of guys to like really bang with like a big, burly, like super skilled guy like the Jokic, Embiid, Davis we've been talking about, right? And then Gordon is the best Luka Doncic defender on the planet, so that would be pretty problematic. They wouldn't have to send as much help. So I just would not like that matchup for Dallas at all. I'm not like, again, I don't want to count them out, and I also agree with you. I think we've seen both of those teams, we've seen Denver dial it up on offense in like a super championship level. Same thing with Minnesota dialing up on defense. We've never really seen Dallas they're funny because they just keep beating teams, but I've never seen them like dial it up and be like, this is a juggernaut. This is like, I don't know. I can't sleep at night because I'm thinking about this team, Yeah. So yeah, that's all cool, good and well. Do you think this Knicks team, if OG Anunoby is good to go, he can give you his 35, 40 minutes a night of his high-level defense, all that stuff, do you think they have a shot against the Boston Celtics?
I will answer that specifically, but are we including Mitchell Robinson in the calculus?
He's not coming back, I don't think. He's
not?
done so.
Oh, okay. What was his injury?
He like broke his ankle.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I didn't realize that happened. That's okay. Yeah, he's done. Never mind. Even with that out of the equation, I think New York has a shot. I think they've got like a fighter's chance. Like they're kind of, I forget who said this, but somebody was like, they're kind of the Rocky of the NBA right now. And like, I definitely see that. I think it would be tough, especially if Boston has Porzingis back. I just think there would be too much defensively for the Knicks to have to figure out. Plus, you've got like the whole 41 minutes per game for all their starters of it all, where I'm like, not just having to figure out a defense, but like for 41 minutes, you're also having to play on the other end and slow down Boston, who, like, let's not forget, Boston's an incredible offense. I do think the Knicks are well equipped to handle Boston's offensive approach. I would still probably have Boston in that series, but I do think there is a like non-zero chance for New York. And enough of a chance that like I wouldn't set the money line at like plus 10,000 odds or anything like that. It'd probably be like, yeah, they're the underdogs, but like more like plus 150 as opposed to like plus 300.
Yeah, sportsbooks should start paying us money to do our podcast. But I'll say so. Okay, so May 8th is when he goes down, right? OG Anunoby. So presume they win this game, right? And I think it's supposed to start May 21st or May 22nd. So he'll get about 2 weeks of rest on that hamstring. Is that enough to get him where he needs to go? I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I keep thinking about that. It would make me really, really, really sad if the Knicks had to play this series even more than if they had to play one game, fine, but if they had to play more than a game against the Celtics without OG Anunoby, that would make me really sad. But again, that's being pretty presumptive considering the Pacers are still in this series.
Right.
they still have a chance. They can still win Game 6.
Let's not count out the Pacers. They do have a chance, but I still think the Knicks are probably going to. I just think the Knicks are going to win. I don't know. Who knows? Is there anything else you want to add before we start wrapping up?
Yeah, I mean, if you just to give the people who strictly listen to us on Spotify a little bit of a taste what they're missing out on. Me and Alex are both struggling with our cats right now. We're both having some cat problems. They're roaming around. Some of the YouTube audience probably could see it.
Wilson is now in a box, so he's passed out. So good for him.
You should subscribe on YouTube. We have some. Now that I'm done with school, I think our consistency is going to be top tier. I have a feeling we're going to have some new stuff coming out. It's very exciting. Ask questions. We answered all the questions that were asked in the last episode, but they got lost, and it just wouldn't feel right trying to answer them again.
They're from 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, you wouldn't even want to. It's like the questions are like, do you think the Clippers can come back and beat the Dallas Mavericks? I don't think you'd want my opinion on that right now. But no. Ask questions again. We're back. We're booming. This won't happen again. I won't graduate law school ever again. Don't worry.
Right. Yeah, be sure to leave a 5-star rating on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Amazon Podcasts, whatever the case may be. Be sure to leave a 5-star rating. Subscribe on YouTube, leave a like, leave a comment, ask us some questions. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at AlexHoops _ at Mat Issa 15, MATISSA 15. Thank you guys so much for listening. We're back, baby. We'll see y'all next week.